Story 1. My ex-boyfriend's mother was a linguistics professor who knew more than 10 languages. She was also one of the most foolish people I have ever met. For example, she believed that in an emergency flight attendants are catapulted out of the plane and that donating blood causes a fatal blood disease. My favorite story was when she insisted her son's knee problems were not the result of a serious injury but because he ate too much ketchup. Story 2. My professor, a brilliant neurosurgeon, once decided to smell a bottle of ammonia. He then told me, "Don't smell that." I had no intention of doing so. Story 3. I have a master's degree in cybersecurity and cannot help my fifth grader with his math homework. Story 4. My experience attending university after doing 2 trades is that many students are surprisingly clueless. I would not call them idiots, but a lot of ignorance develops when you live in a student bubble your whole life. I rented a room to a man who had a master's degree, and it would take him hours to cook dinner. I watched him once. He could not grasp cooking items that require different amounts of time. He would start cooking potatoes and wait until they were done before moving on to the next thing he planned to eat with them. Story 5. My first call at my first information technology job was in a medical laboratory. A doctor who had worked there for years called because her computer would not power on. I asked routine questions. Is the computer plugged in? Is the monitor on? And when did the problem start? I went to her office and found the computer plugged into a power strip whose plug had been inserted into one of its own outlets. The cleaning crew had deep cleaned her office and had not plugged anything back in. The doctor had plugged the power strip into itself, thinking that as long as it was plugged in, that was all she needed. Story 6. My boss, an engineer, put a couple of $100 in coins into a bank pneumatic drive-through tube. The coins got stuck, and the bank had to use a jackhammer to remove them. He was upset that the bank charged him because he did not know this could happen. Large signs, including ones on the tubes, warned customers not to put coins in the tubes. Story 7. I went to 3 emergency rooms when I felt something was wrong with my arm. It felt like a bug bite on day 1, and by day 4 it felt like a bungee cord from my elbow to my wrist. 3 doctors said it was a skin irritation or dermatitis. I kept telling them something was wrong. I do not have a medical degree. I work in property management. On day 5, I walked into another emergency room and said I did not care if I had to pay out of pocket or sit there all night, but something was wrong with my arm. Finally, after many rude looks and comments, I received an ultrasound of my arm, was rushed to magnetic resonance imaging, and was told I was being admitted. I had a 3-inch blood clot in my upper arm, 2 blood clots in my chest area, and 1 had already passed into my lung. I was diagnosed with a factor 2 gene mutation, a blood clotting disorder, 22 days later. Story 8. I have a Doctor of Philosophy degree and work with many others who hold the same qualification. Many believe that because they succeeded in one area, they are experts in every other area of life and always have strong opinions. I think this is sometimes called Doctor of Philosophy syndrome. Story 9. My ex-wife, who holds a Doctor of Philosophy in neuroscience, was driving my car with the handbrake on and called me to ask about the noise and smell. Story 10. I was at a keg party in college and the gravity keg was set up. Someone complained that the beer was not flowing, so I checked and the keg was still almost full. It turned out someone had closed the air intake on top. I opened the intake and poured myself a beer. Problem solved. A few minutes later, someone else complained the beer was out. I told them the keg had been full a few minutes earlier and that it was a tap problem I had fixed. They said they had just come from the keg. I went back and found the intake closed again. I opened it and poured the young woman who said it was empty a beer. As she was leaving, my suite mate came in and closed the intake. My suite mate is a straight-A student who gets mostly A grades, largely due to his photographic memory. I told him he needed to leave the intake open to let air in to replace the beer being dispensed from the lower tap. He proceeded to tell me that since the beer is carbonated, air is not needed to replace the liquid volume lost when the beer is poured. I asked him 2 questions. If it is not needed, why is there an upper tap? And does he really think the amount of gas carbonation gives off in a glass of beer is equal to the volume of the liquid beer? He thought for a few seconds and his only response was, "I have a 4.0. What is your grade point average?" Then he walked away. Story 11. My wife's stepfather is a chemist who has diabetes. One night, he went to the emergency room because his blood sugar was dangerously high. He said he had been eating well, though he normally doesn't, so there was no reason for the high blood sugar. In his car was a 2-liter bottle of ginger ale mixed with grape juice. He said the sugars canceled each other out and that, as a chemist, he knew how to combine things. Story 12. I worked in information technology for a hospital. I was speaking to a doctor who had forgotten his password. While he was spelling his name phonetically over the phone, he said, Z as in xylophone. Needless to say, my eyebrows rose. Story 13. I worked with a coworker who graduated from Brown and constantly talked about it. I went to a state school, and it was clear she looked down on anyone who did not attend an Ivy League school. So one day I couldn't help myself and said, "Oh, you went to Brown, and yet here we are, together in the same place, doing the same job." Story 14. My college roommate, the smartest person I had ever met, spent nearly an hour trying to shove a desk into the corner of our room at an angle. She would not listen to me because, in her words, she got this. After she finally gave up, I walked over, pulled the desk out completely, straightened it against the wall, and pushed it back with one smooth movement and no struggle. Many times I realized that she might be the smart one, but I had more common sense. Story 15. Peter Duesberg is a molecular biologist and researcher at the University of California, Berkeley. He had a stellar career and was well known for his research. He became a denier of acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, claiming there is no link between the human immunodeficiency virus and acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. He misled many people, including individuals living with the human immunodeficiency virus. Some of these people infected others and declined antiretroviral treatment. This included activist Christine Majori, who shared these beliefs, breastfed her infant, and did not use antiretroviral treatment, resulting in transmission of the virus. Story 16. I worked for a statistician who had a Doctor of Philosophy degree in statistics and was dumb as a post. On the other hand, I worked with a really smart colleague who had the same degree and, as he said, all that means is I did the work for the Doctor of Philosophy degree. Story 17. Not quite a Doctor of Philosophy. I was at a party in the United Kingdom full of medical students, and, stereotypically, everyone was extremely drunk. A man fell and broke his collarbone. Immediately a dozen of them rushed over, all fussing and asking him the same questions and going through a checklist. Half an hour later, he was still on the couch in pain. I asked if anyone knew why the ambulance was taking so long. No one had an answer because no one had called one. A party full of medical students had not called an ambulance or arranged transport for someone in severe pain with a broken collarbone. Idiots. Story 18. I used to work at a university, and many academics are highly educated in their chosen fields, but have the common sense of an average dachshund. My favorite example was a group of geology professors and Doctor of Philosophy candidates who were stuck for a few minutes in an entryway because they did not check whether the door required pulling rather than pushing, even though they had entered through the same door less than an hour earlier. Story 19. I had a professor in higher mathematics who had real difficulty figuring out how to get a cup of coffee from the vending machine. Bless him. Story 20. I have a Doctor of Philosophy degree and I am an idiot in most respects. All it takes to get a Doctor of Philosophy degree is to be really good at or persistent in conducting research in a single narrow area of study. Several commenters pointed out that I simplified things too much. A Doctor of Philosophy degree also requires hard work, luck, and some basic competence in a topic, but that does not preclude someone from being completely clueless in other aspects of life. Story 21. I work with medical doctors all the time. They are some of the dumbest smart people I have ever met. Story 22. This is essentially what The Best and the Brightest by David Halberstam is about. It tells the story of how the Kennedy and Johnson administrations drew the United States into the Vietnam War and focuses on Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara. He kept escalating the conflict, and if you questioned him, he could bury you in data showing that the United States was winning and that the Department of Defense just needed more troops and more money to put the country over the top. I am grossly oversimplifying the book, but that is the gist of it. A good companion to the book is the documentary The Fog of War by Errol Morris. It is a one-on-one interview with Robert McNamara, filmed near the end of his life, in which he reflects on the lessons he learned. After watching it, 90% of people come away thinking that McNamara is particularly intelligent and wise, even though there is a mountain of evidence that this is not the case. Story 23. As someone who works security in a hospital, I can say that about 90% of the doctors are smart but lack basic common sense. Sometimes I wonder how they function on a day-to-day basis. Update. I also forgot to mention I am almost 2 years into a relationship with a pediatric cardiologist. It is as shocking at home as it is with the doctors I work with. I laugh out loud, but I cannot say it is boring. Story 24. I have been told that idiots are running the world, but if that's true, I would have thought I'd be a little higher up. Story 25. This is not really an answer, but I feel like sharing. I have a bachelor's degree in creative writing. I went through the worst times of my life getting through college, dealing with depression and missing the friends and family I moved away from, and I have nothing to show for it other than a shiny piece of paper saying, I did it. My current career uses nothing I learned in college, and I'm trying to get back into writing as a hobby and hopefully find some worthwhile opportunity to actually use my education. For years, I have been pestered by friends and family. Anytime I misuse a word, fail to use proper grammar, misspeak, or when autocorrect messes up a text, they immediately criticize me with snarky comments like, that's not how a writer should talk, or wow, it's amazing you got a degree in English with how badly you speak. My go-to response is often something like, my text messages are not being published, shit for brains. It is a really sore spot for me and immediately gets my blood boiling. Story 26. Master of Business Administration graduates are probably the most overhyped group of people on the planet. I am 99% certain that nepotism had become too obvious, so an incredibly expensive degree was created that wealthy friends could use to obtain prestigious jobs and become rich. Most of those graduates I know are actually so unintelligent it hurts. Story 27. My wife has 2 master's degrees and a doctor of philosophy. She is internationally recognized in her field and is absent-minded. My role in her life is to ensure that her car works, that she takes her medications, and that she eats things other than yogurt and eggs. She can be brilliant one minute and walk into the side of a moving bus the next. I love her dearly, but she is a numpty. Story 28. I worked at a tech company and was promoted to team lead. One of our team members was a doctor of philosophy in astrophysics. He would message me constantly asking how to do tasks that were well documented, how to install certain programs, how to gain access to servers or code repositories. We would sit in Zoom calls while I read the instructions aloud and watched him follow them. I was utterly confused as to how he could breathe by himself. Story 29. A longtime friend of mine is absolutely brilliant. He can beat you at chess blindfolded. He studied engineering in college and is one of the smartest people I have ever met. He is a big-picture thinker with great long-term vision and has been incredibly successful. But with everyday tasks he struggled. He could not pack a suitcase or book a flight. Once, while making boxed macaroni and cheese, he could not figure out why it was so watery. He had not drained the pasta after cooking. Story 30. Mother-in-law holds a Doctor of Philosophy degree in a field related to botany. She thought India was a continental island like Australia. To this day, I still have no idea how that happened. When this came up, she was in her mid-60s. Story 31. Dr. Ben Carson, one of the most skilled neurosurgeons alive, thought that the Egyptian pyramids were used to store grain. Story 32. A doctor told me my 6-month-old could not have strep because she was an infant, but I took her to the emergency room because she was getting worse and no urgent care clinics were open. We found out she had strep. Story 33. In 2010, individuals in France used non-medical grade silicone pads in people, which resulted in reported deaths and cases of cancer. Story 34. In a personal note, my wife was a Doctor of Philosophy candidate when we moved in together. Early on, we went to a party, and when we got home I told her I felt inadequate because I was the least educated person in every room and felt kind of dumb listening to them talk about things I had no idea about. She said to me, they each know the most about some little thing they just earned their Doctor of Philosophy for. Some gene mutation or how some molecule interacts in a rarefied environment. But apart from that, they are all just regular people who cannot figure out how to match their socks or talk to a member of the opposite sex. She said, "You are one of the most curious people I know. Your library is bigger and more diverse than anyone else's, and you have actually read it. You ask questions, talk to everyone, and have real things to discuss because you know about topics they find interesting." Now she is a doctor of medicine and doctor of philosophy, and all our friends are doctors of one kind or another, and I am still the least educated person at the party. But now I can see people are just people, and yes, you can be extremely smart about one thing and still make mistakes in the real world. It is far more important to be a good, kind person who does what you say you will do than to be the smartest kid in class. At least that is how we raised our kids. Story 35. I know many people in the scientific field who conduct double-blind randomized controlled experiments in the laboratory and then go home and check their horoscopes. Story 36. I do not need to listen to you. I have credentials. If you are not willing to consider novel information because of the messenger, you are an idiot. Story 37. If you work in information technology, you feel this. Every lawyer, doctor, celebrity, and chief executive officer I have ever worked with is computer illiterate. They can send email and use Twitter, and that is about it. They get confused by the mouse, openly call themselves Luddites, unplug the power cord, and say the box is broken. This includes mega millionaires. They may be smart in other areas, but computers are their kryptonite. Story 38. As an aside, consider how much nepotism influences admission to Ivy League schools before automatically being impressed by someone's degree from one. Story 39. British historian David Starkey is only a historian regarding Tudor England from 1485 to 1603. Other than that, he is a complete idiot, especially when it comes to politics. Story 40. My uncle is extremely smart. He has multiple master's degrees in education and science, consistently wins awards for his teaching, and receives high evaluations from his students. Why did this idiot need me to remind him how to make ramen several times? Story 41. To get a doctorate, you need to know absolutely nothing about a wide range of subjects. Story 42. I knew a nuclear engineer who worked at Bruce Nuclear, one of the largest nuclear power plants on Earth. He earned a seven-figure salary for his expertise in nuclear physics. He was able to explain to me in detail how the Chernobyl accident happened and why it would be impossible with Canadian deuterium-uranium reactor designs. A few hours later, he showed me a magnetic copper bracelet he had bought at the pharmacy. He said it captures negative ions in his blood and helps with his arthritis. Placebo is a hell of a drug. Story 43. I had a friend with a doctor of philosophy in pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics, an area of pharmaceutical science that was beyond my understanding. One night at 10 p.m., she called me. Sorry to call so late, Jackie. I'm having a car emergency and my boyfriend is not picking up. It's totally fine. What's wrong? I'm out of gas. I grabbed my jacket and car keys. It's okay. This kind of thing happens. Where are you? Which exit are you near? Did you pass a service station? I'm at a service station. Okay. Are you near a gas pump? Yes. I am next to one. Okay, how do you pump gas? I grew up in New Jersey. Stop laughing. This is serious. Story 44. Boris Johnson, former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, is a good example of what happens when a first-class education encounters a vacuum. He was an absolutely colossal moron, insanely out of his depth, and he will not be remembered as the worst Prime Minister the United Kingdom ever had only because his successor, Liz Truss, lasted just over a month after. Deciding that what the country needed amid post-Brexit financial difficulties and a poorly managed response to the coronavirus disease 2019 was tax breaks for the rich, which left the United Kingdom hours from bankruptcy. Yet somehow Boris Johnson still seems the greater fool. Story 45. Education is filled with people who hold master's degrees, and I would not want them teaching my child. Story 46. My old psychiatrist was morally opposed to prescribing certain effective medications, and instead recommended that I continue consuming almost twice the recommended daily limit of caffeine. He had decades of experience, and my therapist thinks quite highly of him, but I do not share her enthusiasm. Story 47. Dr. Oz attended Harvard, is a university professor and pioneered several cardiac surgery techniques. He also promoted hydroxychloroquine to fight coronavirus disease 2019 after reading about it on the internet. I do not mention the obvious scams he promotes on his television show because I do not think he genuinely believes in them. They appear to be an act intended to scam gullible people. Story 48. My grandfather has a doctorate in biochemistry from the California Institute of Technology. He spent his professional career in academia doing research and teaching around the world. In this area and in others, he is incredibly smart. In many other respects, he has the common sense of a toddler, and sometimes it seems amazing that he reached his 80s. Story 49. Many United States politicians are lawyers from prestigious schools, but they are idiots. Story 50. I know a geologist who is a flat earther. A goddamn geologist of all people. Also, anti-vaccine healthcare workers. What the hell? Story 51. My ex was a highly educated engineer working as a contractor for the Department of Defense. 2 weeks after I ended the relationship, he married a woman he had known from high school and had a child soon after. When she later left him, the ensuing custody battle was bitter. Since she was a teacher and he was an engineer, his strategy was to file multiple frivolous motions to run up her legal bills and force her to give up the child. The judge saw through his tactics and, after multiple warnings, imposed massive sanctions on both him and his lawyer. The case was written up in legal journals as a never-do-this example, and his erratic behavior cost him his security clearance, so he lost his position with the Department of Defense. The whole situation could have been avoided by doing almost anything else. Story 52. My brother's former roommate was in medical school and would put glasses in the dishwasher facing up. When the cycle finished, you were left with a refreshing glass of dirty dishwater. Yes, he is a doctor now. Story 53. I have a Doctor of Philosophy degree, and I'm an idiot. A couple of weeks ago, I got on the highway to go to work, even though I usually don't because my workplace is beside the highway. I got stuck in rush hour gridlock for half an hour when I was 2 minutes away from work. Story 54. Our federal government is almost entirely made up of people with law degrees from Ivy League schools. I can't think of a better example than that. Story 55. I am a professor, and the average faculty committee meeting at any university provides ample evidence of this. Story 56. My great-uncle is a brilliant engineer but has zero social awareness. If I tell him a joke about dogs, he does not laugh. Instead, he will tell you how the evolution of dogs mirrors that of humans and how our species are symbiotic or something like that. When we explain it was a joke, he replays it in his mind and then laughs. Edit. I appreciate the online diagnoses, but he is absolutely not autistic. Story 57. My college was fully remote for almost 2 years. When I returned to the department for in-person classes, one of my colleagues caught me in the hallway. He started repeating a mix of anti-vaccine Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan talking points at me. Whenever I tried to question or disagree, he countered by asking, "Where is your evidence?" He tried to tell me that wearing a surgical mask cuts off oxygen to your brain. His wife is a nurse. 2 years of isolation and right-wing podcasts radicalized a previously intelligent, rational, pragmatic person. I feel bad for his children. Story 58. I have read many books and solved numerous problems. Yet there is a small chance that when I drink something it will go down the wrong way and I will have an uncontrollable coughing spell that lasts for several minutes. Now tell me, how intelligent can I really be? Story 59. My sister-in-law, who holds a Doctor of Philosophy degree, wondered, I closed the doors. How are the ants getting inside the house? Story 60. Only 5 people in the world have ever won 2 Nobel Prizes. One was the chemist Linus Pauling, who won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry and the Nobel Peace Prize. Later in life, he became convinced of the benefits of megavitamin therapy, a theory unsupported by evidence, which claims that taking excessive amounts of vitamin C prevents disease, including the common cold and cancer. Story 61. My grandfather was a well-educated college graduate. He worked as a teacher before World War II, was drafted, rose to the rank of captain, and later became an executive at an insurance company. He checked a gas grill for leaks by running a lit cigarette along the gas line. It did have a leak. Rest in peace, Grandpa. Story 62. During the pandemic response in the United States, everyone became a virologist except the actual virologists, who were called sellouts and liars. Story 63. Look at nearly every United States politician who graduated from Ivy League schools. They believe some incredibly stupid things. Story 64. Being intelligent and being an idiot are not mutually exclusive. Some of the smartest people are idiots, and some of the least intelligent are too. In fact, some average people are idiots as well. In short, idiocy is neither positively nor negatively correlated with intelligence. Story 65. Ben Carson is a neurosurgeon who believes the pyramids were built to store grain. Story 66. My daughter has a master's degree from Oxford. She called me in a panic because there was a power cut and her roast was in the oven. I told her and her husband to bring it to my house to finish cooking. Because it was night, I reminded her of the torch her father and I had placed on her hall stand for emergencies. She said not to worry because the power cut had affected only the sockets, not the lights. We realized they had blown a fuse and talked them through changing it. She is our only child and we are so proud. Story 67. I have always disliked the saying those who cannot do teach because teaching others is an undervalued skill. Some of the worst teachers I ever had were highly educated. They knew the subject but were not equipped to teach it. Story 68. High intelligence quotient does not mean someone is smart. I know people with an intelligence quotient of 150 who believe the election was stolen and that vaccines for coronavirus disease 2019 are more harmful than the disease. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.